In case you're in the wrong show by mistake, we are Motorhead. And we are going to clean your clock.
Welcome to the 50th episode of our podcast series. So I was reflecting on how best to mark the occasion when I thought, hey, why not celebrate Motorhead and do a discography review, considering that Motorhead, Lemmy, and the boys had such an impact on all the different extreme metal genres. I thought it would be really appropriate. As usual with our discography reviews, we'll be attacking this chronologically. And again, no live albums, no compilations, no covers. So in Motorhead's case, we've got 22 original albums that we have to cover. And we'll insert some songs along the way as well. But I'm going to try and keep this under 1 hour. We're going to start with what most people would call the classic era between 1977 and 1982 with Motorhead, the self-titled album issued in 1977. Immediately, the classic lineup is intact. We got Lemmy, a fiver on bass, Filthy Animal Taylor on drums, and Fast Eddie Clarke on guitar. Also of note, the mascot, War Pig, graces the first album cover right away. So the band had decided to call it a day actually in 1977, but Fast Eddie Clarke had convinced the boys to go in and record a single as representative of the year and a half up to date that they had spent together. But when they went in that weekend to record that single, they were able to crank out the whole album, and hence we have Motorhead. Not surprisingly, the debut comes across as rushed and sloppy, and the second side has too much of just straight up rock and roll. But when I re-listened to this, I was surprised. It was better than I originally remembered it being, especially the first side, songs like Motorhead, Lost Johnny, Iron Horse, Born to Lose. These ones could have fit on Overkill if they'd been better produced. So altogether, not a bad album. I've consider it a 6. Over a year later, in March of 1979, Overkill gets released. Now, opening with the double bass drum propelled title track, it's immediately obvious that the sound has been cleaned up as legendary producer Jimmy Miller has been brought in. Now, this album has many great tracks in there. You've got the title track, Tear Ya Down, the boogified No Class, and the closer Limb from Limb. However, when I revisited this, I forgot about the overrated Stay Clean, Metropolis, and Capricorn threesome. I find them a bit too slow and psychedelic for my taste. They're all right, but they bring down the caliber of the rest of the material. So much so that I've always considered Overkill to be a classic 10 out of 10, but I'm going to downgrade it in my mind. I think it's a 9 out of 10, but still has some great tracks on it, like Tear Ya Down. The Iron was hot. The band issued Bomber later that year in December of 1979. Now, I consider this to be an improvement on Overkill. I know that it's against the grain. Most would consider Overkill the better album. But when you put the two albums together and look at the track-by-track listing, there's no question in my mind Bomber is much more consistent, better written. Listen to some of the choice cuts here. We got the bass strafing title track. We got the opener Dead Men Tell No Tales, the dive bombing Sharpshooter, and the Wall of Sound Poison. The only weak spot here would be the bluesy Step Down with a questionable lead vocal from Fast Eddie. But, you can forgive him for that one. I give this a 10 out of 10. So let's listen to Poison. 1 year later, in 1980, Ace of Spades gets released, and this is the undisputed heavyweight champion of the Motorhead discography. If you only have one Motorhead album, this is undoubtedly going to be the one in your collection. So this was a huge record in my native Toronto, with Bite the Bullet and the title track doing regular radio rotation. And the band came to town, actually, and sold out so quickly on the first gig at the Danforth Music Hall that they booked 2 gigs the same night. And my brother and I were lucky enough to see both concerts, and they were definitely the loudest concert I've ever been to in my life, ears ringing for a week after. In fact, one of the reviewers called it Battle of the Marne loud. It was so bad. A memorable night of debauchery with an anvil opening, actually. Absolutely no weak spots here. All tracks reflective of its buy or die cult status, an obvious 10 out of 10. Let's listen to Fire Fire. It's always difficult to follow up a classic, and in 1982, Motorhead issued Iron Fist. Some internal discontent in the ranks here at this point, as Fast Eddie was left to his own devices to produce the album, later claiming that Lemmy wasn't fully engaged in the platter. Now, most people look down upon this release, but not me. When you look at all the tracks on this is a strong batch of tunes. You got stuff like the Road Opus America, the Fist to Face title track, the Pointed Don't Need Religion, and the Speedster Sex and Outrage. I would give this a 9, and in fact, if I was pushed to the wall, I'd say this is actually better than Overkill. I know, sacrilege, but that's the way I feel. Here's Sex and Outrage. So ends the golden era of the band as Fast Eddie leaves the unit, and we enter into what I'm going to call the unsettled years between 1983 and 1995. In 83, unfathomably, in is Thin Lizzy guitarist Brian Robertson. Who the hell would think of putting them, Lemmy, together with Brian Robertson? Anyway, at that point when it came out, most people ignored this album. But I and my brother, actually, we both embraced this immediately and just loved it. The sound of Lemmy playing lead bass against such a great guitarist as Brian Robertson, and really well written. Even the War Pig looked great, more colorful on and mean as ever on the spray painted cover. Now, I would say that this is probably my second favorite Motorhead album of all time, tied with Bomber, and I definitely call it a classic 10 out of 10. No weak spots at all on this album. Let's listen to Shine. A 3-year absence as Lemmy picks up the pieces after both Filthy Animal and Robertson, along with his ballet shoes and leg warmers, left the band. In are Wizzo and Wurzel on guitars, along with Pete Gill of Saxon fame on drums. Now, this same unit provided 4 new tracks, including the legendary Killed by Death on the No Remorse compilation issued two years previous. So I remember being absolutely stoked about hearing the return of the band here and enthusiastically embracing this album, Orgasmatron, 1986. However, when you look back on it and listen to it, the production is a step or two down from Another Perfect Day, lacking some of the power that a good Motorhead platter requires. Still good. A strong album. It's got stuff like the mid-pace Built for Speed, Uber Speedy, Riding with the Driver, and Nothing Up the Sleeve, along with the punishing Dr. Rock. I give this an 8 out of 10. Here's Nothing Up My Sleeve. A year later, in 1987, we get the album Rock and Roll. So Pete Gill is out and Filthy Animal Taylor is back behind the drum kit. So the production is a little bit better than the last one, but the writing just ain't as good. There were some successful and surprising introduction of melody here. Check out the chorus of Blackheart and All For You. Some interesting stuff there. Some choice cuts would be the power-packed closer Boogeyman, the 1-2 opening of the title track and Eat the Rich, and the aforementioned All For You. I guess this album a 7 out of 10. Here's Boogeyman. 4-year break between albums to 1991 when the band issued 1916. During that period, Lemmy moved to LA from England. Now this one has a lot of variation. You've got a rock ballad, depressing title track War Dirge, a couple of rock and roll ditties, and usual Motorhead heavy fare. Choice cuts would be the percussive opener, the one to sing the blues, I'm So Bad Baby I Don't Care, another anti-religion ditty, No Voices in the Sky, and the perfect ode to their brethren the Ramones, Ramones. Now it does have Nighttime, the Dream Time, which is a boring trot, and a filler or two. I'd give this one an 8 though, an uptick on the last album. So let's listen to Ramones. Year to 1992, and we get March or Die. With Tommy Aldridge and Mickey D guesting on the drum stool after Filthy Animal gets kicked out of the band yet again. So here Lemmy reaches for the cash and fails spectacularly. Awful album. This is the worst album of the Motorhead discography, no question about it. You've got a cover of Ted Nugent's Cat Scratch Fever. One thing, Motorhead are the worst cover band of all time. They do the worst covers. I don't know why, but here we have, as we said, the Cat Scratch Fever, just awful. Then we have some boring acoustic drivel of Ain't No Nice Guy, where you see Lemmy and Ozzy crooning pretentiously. And you also have the plodding, overplayed Hellraiser, cynically played for the radio. No thanks. Just an awful album. Stay away. I'd give this a 4. The only ones that I would extract, if you had to, would be Asylum Choir, Name in the Vein, and Too Good to Be True. Otherwise, forget it. A year later, 1993, however, out comes Bastards, and the first 3 songs on this album, wow, haven't heard Motorhead with that much vigor since Orgasmatron. This was no nonsense, in your face, pummeling Motorhead at its best, with Mickey D sitting in at the drum stool. That said, I'm going to go against convention here and say that this album is overrated. The first 3 tracks are amazing, and you've got Bad Woman and Devils. But other than that, it's inconsistent. There's a huge drop-off in quality, too much filler. And then on top of that, you have the too bouncy, almost radio-friendly Born to Raise Hell, and the atrocious acoustic Don't Let Daddy Kiss Me. So overall, I'd give this a 7. But man, it would have been a great EP. Here's On Your Feet or On Your Knees.
And I can't play that game no more. Wake up and see it through. You're ready to save the view. I know what the blind man sees. I can be the light.
years later, in 1995, we get Sacrifice. Check out the rude phallic tongue on Warpig on this album cover. Yeesh. Now, this one had some down-tuned guitars that were de rigueur at the time. It's a little off-putting, but you can overlook it. It's got rock-solid tracks from front to back. It's got some pummeling ones, some really good rock and roll ones. Check out Don't Waste Your Time. There's also the percussive title track, the tough dog-faced boy, and the concluding In Another Time and Out of the Sun. In my mind, this is the album that Bastards pertains to be. So I give this one an 8 out of 10, and here's Out of the Sun.
Trees of stone where I live, leaves of razor steel, high and low and ice and snow, broken on the wheel. Trees of stone where I live, flowers made of glass, cold and white and wrong and right, and voices from the past. And all the yesterdays are now undone. Out of the sun, frozen and insane, I alone remain, held in the vice of my disdain. There is no way that anyone will ever make me born again.
So ends the unsettled era, and we're entering now into the what I'll call the settled era, as Wurzel is out and leaving the band a three-piece that they would remain until the demise of the band, with Wizzo, Mickey D, and Lemmy. So the first output in this era, 1996's Overnight Sensation, has better production, but is less consistent in the songwriting department compared to Sacrifice. It has some good cuts like Crazy Like a Fox, the hectic Eat the Gun, the melodic chorus of Broken is amazing, and the rhythmically intense Shake the World. I would give this one a 7 out of 10. Move ahead to 2 years to 1998, and War Pig becomes a snake. So this was Snakebite Love. Now, it's pretty well Overnight Sensation Part 2 to these years, but there's no complaining. It's solid enough stuff. There's the rollicking Love for Sale, the nimble title track, the Mickey D highlighted Assassin, and the concluding thundering Desperate for You and Better Off Dead. Good stuff. Now, on the negative side, though, there's some down-tuned guitar grinding a la Sacrifice rears its head on Dogs of War and Nightside. Could have done without. I'd give this one a 7 out of 10. 2 years later, War Pig goes to war. So it's 2000's We Are Motorhead that we're talking about. I remember freaking out about this one when it came out, and it still stands as my favorite latter era Motorhead platter. So it's well produced and the most consistent of the albums of the latter era. You get the speedy opener, See Me Burning, the glorious Stay Out of Jail, the bashing Out to Lunch, and Stage Fright, Crash and Burn. And lastly, the title track that refers back to Ace of Spades and Iron Fist, just an amazing track. On the downside, though, you get another cover, unfortunately, although this one has a little bit of a bite to it. It's the Pistols' God Save the Queen. Regardless, I give this one an 8 out of 10. So let's listen to Stay Out of Jail. 2 years forward to 2002, and we get Hammered. Here the band inserts more subtle melody on this one, not as direct and hard-hitting as We Are Motorhead. Choice cuts would be Brave New World, one of the few Motorhead grinders that actually work for me, called Voices from More, and the Rowdy Red Raw. I'd give this one a 7 out of 10. The band keep cranking them out. 2 years later, in 2004, out comes Inferno. And the urgency returns here. I guess it's because of the introduction of Cameron Webb at the production chair. He seems to have forced the band to be more focused and refreshed here. This one would be, Inferno, would be my second favorite latter era Motorhead platter. Some choice cuts would be the opening 1-2 a punch of Terminal Show and Killers, the rollicking rock and roll of Life's a Bitch, the headbanged Fight, and we're going to listen to the oh-so Motorhead Smiling Like a Killer. Now we get to the back end of the life of Motorhead with their last 5 albums, which I would say are all pretty much replaceable. They all sound the same. They've got your standard latter era rock and roller. You got an anti-religion ditty usually, some mid-tempo stompers, and some up-tempo romps. Not meaning that they're bad, but they are very, very similar. So we'll start with 2006's Kiss of Death. Choice cuts there are the hard-hitting opener Sucker, the catchy One Night Stand, and the melodic Trigger, and love the storming closer Going Down. I'd give this one a 7. Then 2 years later, in 2008, we get Motorizer, which happens to be the worst of the latter era platters. It's light on the songwriting. It just sounds uninspired or tired. You've got the tough Buried Alive and Time Is Right, and the Son of Ace of Spades, Iron Fist, We Are Motorhead track called Rock Out. I would give this one a 6. Let's listen to Rock Out. I'd give 7 out of 10s too, but we'll start with 2010's The World Is Yours, which is a tougher sounding and more focused effort, albeit following the same usual formula. Choice cuts here would be the rollicking I Know How to Die, the autobiographical Get Back in Line, and the closing I Know What You Need, and we're going to listen to Bye Bye Bitch Bye Bye. Closing out the Motorhead discography story here is 2013's Aftershock and 2015's Bad Magic. Now, Aftershock, the choice cuts there would be Coup de Grace, The Speedy End of Time, Do You Believe, The Rollicking Queen of the Damned, and the heat-seeking closer, Paralyzed, an amazing track there. And then in 2015, we get the last album, Bad Magic, which closes out the discography. Choice cuts there would be the In Your Face Victory or Die, Thunder and Lightning, not a Thin Lizzy cover, Electricity, and When the Sky Comes Looking for You. All good tracks there. So that's it. The Motorhead discography reviewed in under an hour, as promised. Thank you for listening, and remember to visit our website, themightydecibel.com, for all your album reviews. Until next week, see ya!